I shared our private fights with my friends, not knowing he'd hear every recording. Hi, Reddit. I did something terrible, so terrible you probably won't believe it. And I'm not proud of it. I shared our private fights with my friends, and what makes it terrible is not even the act itself. It's the content. It should never have been heard by my friends or anyone. It should have never left that room. If I could take it all back, I would. Every word, every recording, every careless moment I chose to vent instead of protecting the man I claimed to love. I can't even believe I did that to someone who literally saved my life. Looking back at everything now, it doesn't even make sense because I don't know what came over me. I honestly don't know why I thought it was okay to laugh at something like that. Before my boyfriend Ken became a laughingstock amongst me and my friends, I loved to call him my superhero. And this was before our relationship went sour. Before I realized that not every knight in shining armor is meant for you, and someone saving you doesn't always mean they're good for you. Believe me, there was a reason behind that. He earned that superhero title then, and he still does, except I only realized it a little too late. And here's the reason. You won't believe how I met Ken. It was raining that night. You know, this kind of cold, mean rain that makes the city feel a little darker than usual. And I was just returning from one of my friend's place. Her boyfriend came over uninvited, so I had to leave. It wasn't pouring when I left there. The storm caught me halfway down the street. My umbrella kept flipping inside out, and each time it did, I swear the wind sounded like someone whispering my name. I was so scared, and I remember thinking, this is how horror movies start. I was cold, alone, and starting to feel like I wasn't the only one out there. I kept glancing over my shoulder as I walked, trying to move faster, but I couldn't see anyone. My house wasn't far, and I kept telling myself I'd be home soon. But then, suddenly, 2 guys appeared, walking way too close. One bumped into me hard, and before I could react, the other one reached for my bag. My heart jumped, and I froze. My feet were literally rooted to the spot, and then, bam! Out of nowhere, someone tackled one of them. He just slammed him hard to the ground, like a scene straight out of an action movie. The other guy ran off immediately. It was impressive, really impressive, but I couldn't be. I couldn't be impressed because I was drenched, shaking, and still in shock. Then he turned to me, this complete stranger, and with the calmest voice I've ever heard, asked, "Are you okay?" That was Ken. I didn't even say a word. I didn't know how to respond. I wanted to say something, but it was like my tongue had been cut. I was completely mute. I just kept moving. And he joined me, asking where I stayed, and I just pointed. He walked me all the way home. I was grateful, and I wanted to say thank you properly, but I couldn't. I couldn't bring myself to do it, and also, my head was already forming weird ideas, like what if it was all a setup or something crazy like that? What if he was just a stalker who set up a perfect opportunity to smoothly dive right into my life? But it didn't seem that way. We got coffee the next day. I apologized for not showing appreciation the night before, and he seemed to understand. He said I was probably still in shock, and that it made sense. I thought I was just saying thank you. I didn't know I'd end up falling for the guy who literally saved me. We hung out for a while, went on multiple dates before making it official. I wasn't expecting to be in a relationship that fast, or at that point in my life. I wasn't even looking for love then. My friends were honestly surprised because I loved the freedom that comes with not being attached to anyone or having to live your life to please one particular person. And that's why I really never wanted a part in any kind of ship. But you know what they say? Love happens when you least expect it. Ken's charms were too irresistible until they weren't. And that turned me off a bit. He had this natural problem he couldn't control. I knew clearly it wasn't his fault, but each time it happened, it threw me off. It was painfully clear my once perfect savior wasn't so perfect. Talking about it this way might seem like I'm mocking him, but trust me, I'm not. Some people just have things they can't cope with, and that's how it was for me. I couldn't because it annoyed the shit out of me. It irritated me to the point where I wished we didn't have to be in a relationship, but by then it was already too late. We had something serious going on, and that problem didn't excuse the fact that Ken was taking care of me and being one of the sweetest partners ever. With him, I didn't even feel like I'd lost the freedom of being single, because he never forced anything. I stayed over at his place sometimes, and he always respected my boundaries, like when I wasn't in the mood to do certain things or didn't feel like hanging out. He understood all of that. He never expected us to do everything together, and I couldn't have wished for anything more than to be in a relationship with someone like that. I was truly blessed. But I didn't feel blessed, because I wasn't comfortable with my boyfriend publicly. I felt like he wouldn't be able to defend me if a situation arose or fought for me. I might sound like a joker because I mentioned earlier how he took down 2 guys, but you'll get me soon. That doesn't even count because violence isn't the solution to everything. And as much as I didn't feel proud of him anymore in public spaces, I didn't hate him. I just didn't want him to be introduced to more people around me, just in case anything resulted in what I have always feared. That might have made him feel suffocated, but still, it was for the good of both of us. No one wants shame accompanying their existence, so handling things that way made everything better. I tried my best to hide that part of him from the public eyes because I didn't also want him to feel dejected or bullied by anyone. He might have seen it as me not being proud of him, but I was only trying to do what's best for him. Sometimes it felt overwhelming, so I just vent to my friends. We had a group chat where we talked about everything. They sent their rants and I sent mine. We laughed at each other's misfortunes, offered advice, and comforted one another like sisters. It helped ease my burdens. I thought it was safe, given the fact that it is just between me and my 2 closest friends. But I forgot one thing, how overly twisted and dramatic my friends were. Right now, I wished I never did, because that's how I provoked the ugly side of Ken I never knew existed and ruined everything for us. I should have known better than to send recordings about my relationship. Ken doesn't do well in arguments, at all. I still remember the first serious fight we ever had. It wasn't even over something that deep. I think I said something about how he never makes proper plans, and he got defensive. The next thing I knew, we were going back and forth. Well, I was. He just stood there, red-faced, trying to get a full sentence out, but failing miserably. He had this stutter that only showed up when he was really angry, like boiling angry, and that day it kicked in hard. He was trying to say something like, "You always twist my words," but it came out like, you all, and then he just gave up midway and stared at the wall like it had personally offended him. I swear it took a miracle for me not to laugh, and honestly, a small part of me did laugh inside. And it's not because I didn't care, but because it was just such a weird mix of emotions. He was furious, I was frustrated, and suddenly he looked like a confused toddler trying to recite Shakespeare under pressure. It was funny and kind of sad. I didn't even know what to say. Do you pause the argument and hug him? Do you pretend not to notice? I just stood there, watching him wrestle with his words, and I remember thinking, how are we even supposed to fight properly if you can't speak when you're mad? That moment stuck with me. It was the first time I found out. It was awkward though, but that was not why it stuck with me. It was because it told me something I didn't want to admit out loud. Ken wasn't built for confrontation, and it only got worse after that. This is actually the reason I stopped hanging out with him in public spaces. I never said it to his face the way it felt. The truth is, I started to feel embarrassed. The worst was this one evening we were at this casual rooftop restaurant. It was not really a fancy place, just drinks, music, open air, and a pretty view. We were seated near the corner, having a decent time, laughing, talking, until this guy from another table started bothering us. He looked drunk, or just stupid, I don't know. But he kept glancing at me and then loudly saying things like, "Why is a pretty girl like you wasting her time with a guy like that?" At first we ignored it, but the guy wouldn't stop. He got up, came to our table and said, "Yo, bro, you even know how to keep a woman like this? Or you just sit there like a mute and pray she doesn't leave you?" Ken stood up. I swear I felt my heart rate spike because for a second I thought, okay, here we go. Maybe he's got this. But he opened his mouth and disappointedly, nothing came out. Nothing at all. Just that damn stutter again. What, yo, you... And then silence. His fists were clenched and his jaw was tight, but there were no words. The guy looked at him like he was watching a comedy sketch. Then went, "Yo," he laughed. "Is he buffering?" I wanted the ground to open and swallow me. Everyone around us turned to stare. The guy kept laughing and mocking him, repeating his stutter like it was part of some stand-up routine. And Ken just stood there paralyzed. He couldn't defend himself, he couldn't defend me, and he couldn't even tell the waiter to get the guy out. I had to be the one to step in and call security. That night changed something in me. I know it's cruel to say, but from that day, I started making excuses not to go out with him anymore. I kept things indoors, safe, away from crowds, away from the risk of him freezing up again. The truth is, I never forgot how small he looked that night, and I think that's when I started to treat him small too. I didn't tell anyone at first, because I didn't know how to explain it without sounding like a terrible person. But that's the thing, when something starts to rot quietly, it always finds a way to smell. One day I couldn't hold it in anymore. I was with my friends. I was already a bit worked up about Ken, so somewhere in between conversations, I started venting. I told them about the argument, narrated the incident that happened at the restaurant, how he couldn't get a sentence out, and how his voice kept glitching like a bad connection. And in the middle of saying it, I just started laughing. I didn't mean to, it just bubbled up and spilled over. They laughed too, but not the way I expected. They didn't even think it was that funny because they weren't there to witness. I could tell they didn't get it, not fully, and that annoyed me, because I needed someone to see what I saw. I needed them to understand that I wasn't exaggerating, that it wasn't just a quirk, it was embarrassing. So I did something stupid. I created a scene. I picked a fight with Ken. I was at his place. He just returned from work, and I don't even remember what I said exactly. It wasn't even a real issue. I just threw little jabs until he got flustered, and like clockwork, he started spiraling. The stutter came back, stronger than ever. His words kept tripping over themselves, and I secretly recorded everything. He looked like a clown to me, although it felt disgusting. But I did it anyway. Sometimes I'll randomly provoke him just so I could make a recording. I needed enough proof of different situations to show my friends exactly what I was talking about, so they'll know how I felt. And sometimes, during the arguments, I find it difficult to hold back my laughter, and I just end up laughing. The most humiliating one was during one of our sexual activities. I think an alarm on my phone went off, some random reminder I'd forgotten to delete. It startled both of us, but while I was reaching for my phone to stop it, Ken completely froze. Like he just locked up mid-movement. He tried to say something, to ask if everything was okay, but the stutter hit him hard. His mouth was moving, but nothing was coming out. It was just broken syllables and breathy pauses. I sat there underneath him, caught between concern and that same awful urge to laugh. Don't get me wrong, it's not because it was funny. God, it wasn't. It was sad. It was like watching someone fight their own body and lose. But the moment itself was ridiculous. The alarm was still buzzing, and his face was twisted in frustration, and I was just lying there half naked, wondering how we'd gotten to this point. I tried to comfort him, to act like it was nothing, but it wasn't easy to shake off. He got off me eventually and sat on the edge of the bed, facing away, and was completely silent. And for the first time, I didn't say anything either, because I didn't know what to say that wouldn't sound like pity or mockery. I think something cracked that day. After that, every time I looked at him, all I could remember was that moment, and somehow it became the final joke in my private reel of Ken's greatest hits. I know that wasn't fair to him. The next day, I played all the recordings for my friends. This time, they laughed hard. One of them even had to pause to catch her breath. They laughed their hearts out and told me it was kind of cute because I could laugh when we were arguing and the fight would stop. That even made everything more funny. They finally saw what I meant, and for a split second, I felt validated. Like I wasn't being unfair, but when the laughter died down, I felt sick, because I couldn't believe how far I was willing to go just to prove I was right, and because I knew I was losing respect for him, and I think he could feel it too. He started acting weird, more clingy, overly agreeable, always trying to impress me with things I didn't ask for. I think he was trying to prove himself, but it only made things worse. It was like watching someone drown slowly while pretending they could swim. The worst part is, he still called himself my protector, my superhero. Every time he said it, I wanted to scream, because deep down, I knew the man who saved me that night from getting mugged wasn't the same man who stood paralyzed in that restaurant. One version of him fought for me, the other couldn't even speak up, and that's when I realized something even darker. Maybe I only fell for Ken because he saved me. Maybe if that night never happened, I wouldn't have chosen him at all. I thought of breaking up with him, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. There were good sides, and he takes care of me, so I wasn't ready to let this embarrassing part of him take away everything. I was bummed, but I think I was addicted to the good that I couldn't let go. But the good kept getting harder and harder to see, or at least take note of, especially with how frequently his stutter came up. I can't remember in detail, but I think he was having problems at work, so he was frustrated a lot. Whenever we tried to hang out, he would get lost in his thoughts, and that made tolerating him very difficult. It was like the sweet side of him couldn't show its face anymore because he became so occupied with work and the problems he was facing. And one evening, when I asked if he could pick me up from a friend's party because it was too late and I couldn't go home alone, I could tell that he was really mad over the phone, but he just muttered a slow, "Okay." I could feel how much energy it took for him to say that one word without breaking it. I guess he didn't like the idea of coming to pick me up on foot or with a taxi because he borrowed his neighbor's car. I could see his face when he parked outside the venue where we were having the party. He refused to come out of the car, and I just went to meet him there. I didn't want to have a conversation because I had a lot to drink during the party, so I was just using my phone. When he stopped in front of my house, he pointed to the entrance. I think he was trying his best not to speak with words. I saw that we had arrived, and I asked him if he couldn't at least come open the door for me. That's when he went on a rampage. Every single thing he was pressing down suddenly erupted. Luckily, I was already on my phone, so I just began sound recording. And believe me, that night's stutter was really bad. He was angry about how I just called out of the blue for him to pick me up from some stupid party simply because I couldn't plan properly. And he had to leave the project he was working on, even though he had to submit it in the morning and his boss had insulted and humiliated him publicly because he didn't like earlier versions of the work. But that took so long for him to say. It was like listening to a really long album. I think he said something about how his new boss didn't like him and was breathing down his neck, and he might get fired, and here I was partying and staying out late. When I just couldn't take it anymore, I told him that this was all simply because I asked him to open the door for me. Then I got out of the car and went in. When I played that particular recording for my friends, they almost died from the laughter. But I think the most stupid part of that day wasn't the laughter. It was when one of my friends said that she needed to have the recording, and a handful of them agreed with her, saying the same, and I just gave them my phone to have it. I didn't think it was a big deal at the time. I mean, it's not like they were going to play it to him. But that's exactly what happened. Well, not exactly. Ken and I went to our friend's wedding anniversary party, and while we were there, Ken was looking at the children playing with each other when Julia's phone rang. Julia was one of my friends, and she had turned the recording of Ken's stutters into some sort of DJ mix with a beat. In my defense, the beat sounded cool, but the problem was that she was just beside us. My eyes immediately spread wide like butter on bread, and I looked at her as though threatening her with my eyes. She quickly pulled out her phone and ended the call, then put her phone on DND. We both looked at Ken. I remember how heavy my heart was pounding. It was like it was going to skip out of my chest. Ken looked at us, and he opened his mouth to speak. I was so terrified that I was about to start apologizing. "What are you two weirdos looking at?" That was what he asked. I couldn't believe it. He didn't notice. I just said that I wasn't looking at anything. Then I looked at my friend again with killer eyes. After the party, I didn't see Ken. I called him, but he wasn't picking up. I even went around asking everyone that was still around if they had seen him, but nobody had seen him. It was as though he had disappeared into thin air. The hosts of the party told me that he might have gone home, and that just drove me crazy. I mean, there was no possible way that he would leave me at the party alone. I was furious, but I told myself I wouldn't exchange words with him because there was no point. I wasn't in the mood to listen to him struggle with his speech. That wasn't an argument, that was just sad. So I went home, expecting to get a call from him telling me what went wrong, but no call came. I waited for an apology call, yet there was none. He didn't come over, he didn't call or text, and I was curious and restless, but I didn't want to cave first. After all, I didn't do anything wrong this time. But after almost a week of no communication between us, I just barged into his house on the weekend. I had tried calling him because I needed him to bring my laptop over. I left it in his house, and I really needed it for work, but he wasn't picking up. He was sitting on his couch, sipping coffee when I entered. I raged and shouted and called him names like unbelievable and so on. As I was shouting, he took his phone and spoke calmly. He didn't stutter one bit, and I was honestly shocked. I knew he didn't stutter because he wasn't angry. He seemed indifferent to everything I just said. He ignored everything I said and just said that he wanted to tell me a story, but I didn't deserve his time and artistic effort. I was about to shout at him again, but he played a sound from his phone, and I heard a recording of one of our arguments, and he was stuttering. He said sometimes he wondered why I'd go so quiet during an argument because I wasn't one to back down, but he now knew the answers. I was giving him the chance to speak so I could record. I asked him how he got it, and he joked about how terrified Julia was when he cornered her in the recording. He didn't even need to say anything before she spilled everything. He definitely fooled me by pretending he didn't hear Julia's ringtone. He then talked about how the beats were actually really good. I tell him I didn't come here to talk about beats, and he said there was nothing for us to talk about, so I should take any of my things in his house and that he never wants to see him again. He was so calm during the whole conversation. I didn't know if he was over it or if he was just blocking out his rage. I tried to calmly tell him that he was taking things too far, and he shouted so suddenly with a loud voice that startled me. Our relationship ended right there without even an argument. Although I refuse to believe we are done, I'm still hoping for a change of heart. Update. If I could undo one mistake, it'd be trusting my friends with our battles instead of standing beside him in the war. It's been a while since my breakup. Ken never looked back. I had to face reality. It seems Ken is seeing someone new. It's like he was waiting to break up with me. Geez, men. Anyways, I'm a mess emotionally and physically. I miss him, but he's made it clear there's no chance. I stopped speaking to Julia and my friends because they caused all this. And I don't think I can forgive them anytime soon, especially Julia. My rent is almost due, and Ken normally always renewed it, but now I have to work and struggle hard so I can pay. I forgot to mention in the original post that I moved to a more comfortable and expensive apartment during my time with Ken. That was when we were dating, and he was the one who helped pay the rent. But now it seems like I'll be moving out again to my small apartment if I'm not careful. Also, I lost the freedom to get what I wanted whenever I wanted, because that's what Ken's card was for. He did all that for me. He must believe I never truly loved him, but I did. His stutter was just embarrassing, and that's not my fault. But I admit, I shouldn't have taken it that far, or let my friends consume the content and use it for whatever reasons.